Last year, over 200 land and water activists around the globe were murdered and thousands more assaulted and injured. Much of this violence took place in countries where companies and governments are able to act with impunity. But there has been a sharp rise in the incidence of harassment in places where there is ostensibly rule of law. The changes in the national mood since the election of Trump to the presidency have seen an increase in violent and threatening discourse. This rhetoric has seen its terrible realization in the Memorial Day murders on the Portland Max and the terrorist attack in Charlottesville. Locally, these threats exist as well. Today, we will discuss the online and offline safety for activists in our community. How do they protect their personal and professional identities? How do they ensure their privacy is maintained? And what are their thoughts and tactics for protecting the privacy in the future?
Hi, my name is Maxwell Brown, and welcome to this first episode of We Are the Media, where we take members from the community's suggestions for television shows, and we take fellow students, we put them together, and we make a new show. This month's episode, we're going to be discussing cybersecurity and activism, and how do you protect yourself in your online and offline world. We have four wonderful guests with us, and I'd like to welcome them all. Our first guest is Joe, local activist. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Joe?
Yeah, my name's Joe. I live in Portland, and I'm involved in activism.
Okay, great. Next, we have Adam. Adam, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
So I've spent probably the last 6 to 8 years in the Portland metro area. Activism as not just a pastime, but something I put as a strong importance for me has probably been the last year or so. And it's just really been an immense amount of learning and experience that I've had in the last year, and it's been very important to me.
Well, welcome. Our next guest is Alia.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Alia, of course, and I've been in activism as soon as I found out what activism was, and I haven't stopped. And I'm kind of like, I find strong importance to it, just as Adam here. So yeah.
Cool. And finally, Miss Black Woman, welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Yeah, well, I'm from Portland, and I got into activism because my nephew got murdered on Northwest 2nd and Cooch on September 26th of 2010. After he was killed, I started thinking about all the other people in my family that were murdered and what was going on in Portland. And then as I started becoming accountable and wanting to hold my city accountable for my nephew's death, other people in my family and in my community also were murdered. And so over the last 7 years, because of all that trauma and the delivery of death in my community and us being called at risk and marginalized because we are being murdered, I became an activist because I think that that's very insulting to our humanity, and I think that policies need to change, but I think that our voices need to be the ones that make that change happen. So I've turned into a community advocate, and I educate people on how to make their voices matter.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about today, but I'd just like to keep in mind that we'd like to frame this conversation around how we protect ourselves in our personal and private lives online and off. So any way we can keep it understood, if maybe this is an important topic for you, maybe it's not an important topic for you, but it's interesting to know as activists how we protect ourselves and how you protect yourselves. So would anybody like to jump in on that one?
Sure. When you get involved with activism, there's always going to be people out there with camera phones, taking pictures, and if there's a strong and violent opposition to what you're trying to accomplish, they will try to figure out who you are and harass you and threaten you. And so when you're looking at your social media, that's the same thing that those kinds of people will look at too, to try to figure out who you are if they have a picture of you from somewhere out at an event somewhere. Not too long ago, I cleaned up my own Facebook account so that if anybody happened to know my name, they wouldn't be able to find it. And I also cleaned it up in a way so that if they had my picture, they wouldn't be able to associate my picture with my Facebook account. the security settings, like making sure that nothing is public. Only friends can see what you do online. That's a very important thing to do, and watch out for when you're commenting on someone else's public post, because you're putting yourself out there in that instance too. And so what I did was I viewed my own profile as a guest, which is something that you can do. So you can basically do a vulnerability check on yourself to see what kind of information can I glean off of this person's Facebook account just by happening to know their name or seeing them post something on a public place and then following them down to see what they're all about.
Well, that raises a really good big question. I didn't have this written down. But as activists, how important is Facebook to you? Like essential, I would imagine, but it seems like it's come into our culture and it's just taken over. So, like you said, your online identity is almost half of your whole identity. So as activists, as non-activists, how important is Facebook to you, Ms. Blackwoman?
When I first became an activist, I already had over 5,000 people following me on one of my Facebook pages, and I probably have about 14 of them. I'm on 47 social media aggregates, and all of them have been connected since maybe around 2010. So I think the messaging and the way that we use those platforms is what's essential to what is empowering for our work. Not what we share and what we don't share. I've never shared like just my own personal stuff. Everything that I do online is intentional, it's strategic. I use algorithms and SEO and all that in order to dominate whatever I need to dominate in regards to trending or going viral. I know that our networks are facilitating through 222 countries because of my past industry, which was a business manager for people in the entertainment industry. So I know that a lot of our work, because we are artists and we are social justice engineers, I know that it's going out into very appropriate industries and it's connecting with them on a way that our communication matters. And in the relationship of communication mattering, that's the social consciousness that we're trying to promote as activists. It's not just to identify that, oh, there's an event happening, or oh, there's a cause that needs to happen. The information that we're promoting and distributing and promoting through all those different networks, the intentional aggregate of posting and where we present that information is so that we can get a return on investment, which is the social conscious and the paradigm shift. And so it works.
Damn. Wow.
Doesn't it?
It does. It does work. It's yeah. So I guess social media is important in that way at all. It's how we reach out and touch those individuals who aren't really out there networking like face to face. It's how we touch those people who are just like on their phones behind the screen, like typing angry comments and stuff, and then they see things and like, oh wait. You know, that's how we really reach to them. So that is important because so much of our population is like that. So,
For sure.
I feel like the biggest use that I personally and that I've seen others use in Facebook is it's an amazing organization and community tool that we can use. In the last few years, I've seen, community events that, are purposely meant for, local, small things that, well, not small, but local impact spread to a global scale, where we have people, we make a community event, whether it be a feed for the homeless, or we have shelter organizations that we need when it's too hot or too cold. We're getting global support, and that's something that Facebook allows us to do. Is it's no longer just us that are fighting, is we can fight on a global scale through Facebook and through these social medias that we're able to use as long as we use them wisely.
Yeah. And then kind of on the flip, it's a tool that can be used against you, right?
Yeah, of course.
That comes to how we protect ourselves online. But before we go into that real quick, Ms. Black, you said a term that got my interested is social justice engineer.
Right.
So is that a newer term? Is that a 21st century term?
No, I think it's the same term that's been used in all of the different uprisings that have happened in our history. I hang out with a lot of archivists and historians. I look at city archives to look at the dynamics of how things are done in our local government. so that when I go in to make my petition, it's not something that's redundant or something that I know, like going in, you don't know what's going to be the outcome, but you can kind of identify those outcomes if you look back at history. So when we talk about social engineer, it's just who is actually developing the shifts in the paradigms. And so when you're able to identify what that is, you're also able to use that as a part of your movement. And so identifying those structural things, you engineer creation of revisiting them. We started off with like our Martin Luther King anniversary events that we would do with the World Arts Foundation, and then turn those into a protest where we would just take the streets with community members in his honor to reclaim his imaging, because we felt like social paradigms in our culture had made him a whitewash. They had made him a very soft individual, non-violent in a way that meant maybe he wasn't protesting loudly, maybe he wasn't being arrested over 100 times, maybe he wasn't taking bridges and freeways, and maybe people weren't being violent against him and the world didn't think that he was being violent against them. But we looked at those paradigm shifts in history and we engineered our identification, our clarity on those items, and we re-engineered those into today's society, like with the hashtag Reclaim King, right? People were like, oh shit, we're reclaiming Dr. King. And so that is social engineering. You're taking paradigms from history and you're building and bridging new gaps for the future and using that consciousness to make it happen. So it's social engineering. It's kind of like art.
Yeah.
And you're just using social media as an art platform to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ms. Blackwell, you already told us what brought you to being an activist, and it seemed like that catalyst was in 2010 approximately, but maybe you're earlier, or that was...
I mean, that was what made me decide to be an activist. Before then, I had grew up in foster care and had to deal with sexual violence and domestic violence and all the things that happen to you when you're a ward of the state. Watching my brother go into gang violence, watching my sister have a baby at age 12. The stuff that happens to you when you're a ward of the state, when the state is your guardian. I saw that, but at the time when my nephew died, when the next generation, where we thought that maybe things were going to get better, that's when I decided, you know what? If it didn't happen for us and their lives don't matter, then nobody matters right now unless we matter. And so I became an activist, and we're still here.
Cool. Alia, what was the catalyst that made you become an activist?
Well, I grew up in a really white area. I'm not gonna lie, really white area. And so I moved to Portland and kind of was networking with some friends and just was educated on like what was going on and oppression and everything. Like I was so blindfolded to everything. Like I would defend all lives matter with my heart and my soul. So I just sat down with a friend and I stopped and I listened to him. And since then I was like, oh my God, like this needs to be fixed. And like I have not stopped.
And when was that?
Like a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Yeah, not too long ago. So.
And so you think it was that conversation or just becoming aware of the
I am
struggles?
100% sure it was that conversation. My awareness of everything has grown since then dramatically, but definitely what flipped my mind was like just pausing for a second and listening. I mean, I remember his exact words were like, "Sister, you are a sister. Listen." and then I was like, oh, okay, that felt nice to have someone call me like sister, I was like, oh, like my heart was like fluttering a little bit. So I was like, I'll listen to you, right? So like I listened, and that's really like what did it.
Okay.
It's really just a conversation away.
Enlightenment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible, I believe. You want to tell us what brought you into being an activist?
Probably just under 2 years ago, I had a really close friend of mine come back from a protest, black and blue. Like he'd gotten the shit beaten out of him by police. And, at that point, I was still one of those people who was like a fringe, I agreed with people who, said police brutality is not okay. I was vaguely aware of some of these, organizations and what they stood for. But, I am a white cis male. I used my privilege to stay out of it. I was one of those people who was like, I don't want to deal with politics. It was not something in my life that I had to deal with until this friend of mine came back, limping. He was so badly hurt. And, even at that time, I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't protest. I was one of those people who was like, shush, shush, it'll go away. And then it came back again, and then eventually he got his head stomped on, and that was kind of the last straw for me, is when it was no longer just one person in my life and it was never a white person who got hurt. It was always a person of color to me, and it was always someone close to me. And at that point I was like, these people, they don't care. They don't care if you're poor. They don't care if you're a person of color. The only thing that matters to them is wealth, property, and if you're white. And at that point I was sick. It sickened me. Like, my stomach hurt that these people were so in power and so controlling of our lives that almost half of our population could just be ignored and controlled.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Joe, what brought you into this? And then I have another question I'm really curious about asking, but yeah, go ahead.
Well,
I love Adam's
I'm one of those people that grew up in an all-white town that was educated hearing about how civil rights is over, there's no more racism, everything's awesome now.
Wow.
Same.
And
Sorry.
okay, years go by, and we have the first black president, and I think, okay, well, maybe this is a pretty good step. But then we still keep hearing about how black people keep getting killed by police. We still keep hearing about how white supremacists have infiltrated police forces all over the country. And then we have the 45th president, who specifically and overtly catered to the most evil people in this country. And I just say that fighting fascism just feels like something that's in my bones. And so I saw the warning signs, and I thought, no way, that can't happen. But it did. And that was the day.
Thanks for sharing that. So this is another question that isn't here, but it made me wonder. Everybody's talking about what catalyzed them and what activated them, motivated them. But what does the word activist actually mean to you? What is an activist for us, for me, for the world? What is an activist to you? Is there one activist? Is there one kind of activist, or is it a wide spectrum? Like, anybody want to try to?
When people start, I think it might have been maybe 2011, 2012, when people started calling me an activist. And I didn't respect that term because I didn't know what it meant. I knew that my nephew was murdered. I knew that my cousin had committed suicide. I knew that Yoshani's body had sat on Rocky Butte for several months while the Portland police, decided not to look for her because they had already gotten an attorney for the person that killed her. I knew that the devastation in my community was so horrible, and I knew that I was doing things about it. I knew that I was making the system be accountable, and I knew that at the same time I was encouraging people that were dealing with it to speak out against it, to it, in its face, right? But I didn't understand what activism meant. I thought that meant we were acting like we were doing something. I thought that was like a kick-off, because they were making it and they were using it to undermine what we were saying. You could be hurt by all this stuff that's happening to you, but you really ain't nobody unless you're a politician or you're a rich person or you're a cis white male, right? So me being a black woman that has people that are dying around me speaking out, when they called me an activist, I took it as an insult. I was like, no, I'm not an activist. I'm trying to do something about this. I don't know what an activist is. My nephew got murdered. I'm trying to do something about it. I can't get him back, but I don't want you taking nothing else from me. So I don't know what you call that, but to me, if they want to call that activism, then we need more people like that. We need more people to give a when people die around them, and not to exploit those people, but to support those families so that they can do something to let the other people in their family know that it's not okay that they died. Because if an activist means that I'm doing something for you without you, then I don't want to be an activist. I want to empower the people that's hurting. So I don't, you know what I'm saying? So don't call me an activist unless that means that I'm part of the solution and that you're empowering that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, I've always seen a lot like Tressa. I didn't really think about it too deeply until I was asked. But like I really see it as someone who acts on injustice. Someone, not even just that, like someone who sees an issue and just acts on it instead of just posting it, reposting it, giving your opinion through online. Like, your opinion doesn't matter. It's insane. So like getting out there and acting on it, telling other members of your community, hey, this is what's going on. Like someone who's like physically putting the work in, not just reposting or gossiping or, you know, trolling.
Guardian.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I realized I kind of labeled everybody as an activist, and it's like, what does that even mean? Like,
They just
like,
put it on you. Nobody asks for that.
I'm a person who acts when things are unjust.
Anybody else to have a unique take on that term? Or?
Those were pretty amazing definitions. For me, an activist is someone who has taken upon themselves the responsibility that everyone should have, but in our society they don't need, to change and fight injustice. And in any form you feel. If an activist is someone who's not afraid to say I stand for something, who's not afraid to say this is wrong, who is not afraid to act. And without that action, I feel like you'd have no claim to those injustices that you say you saw, or you say you don't enjoy, or you say you hate. There's no change without action. And I mean, we have keyboard warriors out there who will type all day and say they support something. But I mean, for me, you're not an activist until I've seen you on the streets.
Until you're a part of the solution.
Until I've seen you fighting the racism, fighting the bigotry, fighting the control.
Stand up for the family, stand up for the people that's hurting.
Always.
That's what makes you an activist, because we get it mixed up in Portland. A lot of times people say that activism is showing up. It's not always showing up, because when it's time to show up, the people are still standing by themselves. When Mike Brown got murdered, we got tens of thousands of people to stand up in the streets. When Larnell Bruce got murdered, people didn't care because it happened here. When Christopher Kalanji got murdered, we didn't even know until May of that year, and he got murdered on January 28th of 2016. You know? When Quantas Hayes got murdered on February 9th, we got beat the hell up by the police while we were on the sidewalk. And I couldn't find any allies, and they had just had 70,000 people out for the Women's March. And people were protesting for Donald Trump, but they didn't come to protest for the 17-year-old boy that Andrew Hurst killed as he told him to crawl with his hands up.
Damn.
That's some, you know what I'm saying? There's a problem with your activism when you don't show up to that. For the people in your neighborhood that's being murdered on the streets where you live. There's a problem with that.
I see what you're saying there.
I'm saying you got to show up to be an activist. You have to be there regardless. You don't hold no ego. You care about those people.
But also, if you just show up, then maybe you're just a tourist.
You're just showing up. You're an exploiter.
Right, just for the fun of it? Or obviously, with the election, people were quite upset. In our liberal left area, people were, and they took to the streets. And those people, like you just said, they showed up for that. But where were they showing up for the next day and the next day?
February 9th happened right after January 20th.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the definition of who is an activist, what an activist, yeah, it's hard to...
You would have thought 70,000 women would have showed up for somebody's child being murdered, a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, and I don't even know that story. Would you want to tell that story?
I'm just going to say that if it was a white kid, all those women would have been there. If it was a little white boy, all of those women would have been there to stand right next to the mothers and the family.
Is that a story that you can share?
You never heard Quantas Hayes' name?
Oh, man.
That's Portland. That's what I'm talking about.
What?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If we had real activism in this city, there couldn't be nobody in the state of Oregon that didn't know that boy's name.
That's exact.
I promise you that.
Well, hopefully maybe this is the time to help enlighten
hope
people. So please, if you want to share that story.
Now, Quantas Hayes is 17 years old. He was murdered on February 9th by Andrew Hurst, who was not called in to attend to him but showed up on the scene of an issue where the police were telling him to come from behind the house. Andrew Hurst had an AK-47 assault rifle, and he used that to shoot
The police?
Quantis. Yes.
Yes.
Shot him in his head, shot him in his torso, shot him in his chest.
Damn.
17 years old as they gave conflicting commands. One officer, Andrew Hurst, said, "Crawl to me." The other officer, Niece, said, "Stand up, put your hands up." Since they were giving conflicting orders, Quantis tried to comply, and he was murdered.
We ask that everyone here tonight celebrate the life and memory of Quantis Derek LaQuante Hayes, who was our son, brother, grandson, nephew, cousin, and friend. We would again like to thank everyone for the outpouring of love, support, and prayers we have received during this difficult time. For those of us who knew Quantis well, we remember him as a vivacious, outgoing, and loving soul who marched to the beat of his own drum. Whether he was giving an impromptu dance at Little Caesars for a free pizza, or displaying his own unique sense of style. Yes, he wore purple skinny jeans and a clip-on earring necklace. Quantis' personality was magnetic. He was the person you liked and remembered the moment you met him. Quantis was a 17-year-old kid that would often prefer an evening at home with his family rather than a night out with his friends. The oldest of 5 children, Quantis was the love of my life. Quantis was idolized by his siblings and adored by his family. We are all struggling to find a sense in his death and are mourning the loss of a life taken too soon.
And they were exonerated in March
March.
of this year in Multnomah County.
And that's that?
That's
That's that.
That's that.
Just like
he's gone now.
Yeah,
He was stolen.
it was taken away. When
Stolen and
Adam was talking about the Stolen Lives exhibition, that's what we're talking about. We had an exhibition in the Pearl that only contained children that were murdered in Portland. And the walls were filled with not just the wallpaper, but even the images that people locally had brought in during the 3 weeks that the exhibition was up. And no one knows those names because our propaganda and our activism organization and everything else is so proper. We're so passive aggressive that we focus on things that we think is going to bring numbers. Oh, this is going to get the numbers. This is not going to. And so we forget about humanity in that. And that's why I say those are exploiters. There's a difference between activism and exploitation. I know that when we first started the Ferguson protest, that I thought that everybody that was showing up was actually down with the movement. I didn't know that they were like paid. I didn't know that they were like unions. I didn't know that their organizations were like, get out there because we're going to be doing our lobbying. I didn't know that they had indoctrination and special interests. I thought they were upset that people were being killed and that they were standing in solidarity with people on this side of the coast so that we could stop that from happening in our communities. But I've learned more since then, and that's just been in the last 3 years that I've learned so much more. And it's horrible because there's a lot of blur out there. It's a lot of propagandizing that's happening. And it's to the detriment of public safety because people like ourselves that think that the community is on our side and that we're really challenging these policies that are allowing people to be exonerated for murdering us, we're thinking that those numbers mean solidarity. It doesn't. We're still by ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like if our interest is not the interest and focus of the people with money and lobbying and political power, then we don't matter.
Yeah.
Right, Joe?
That's right.
Yeah.
Sounds right on to me.
I'll just say one thing. Activism is that feeling when you're done waiting on the world to change. And you get up and do something.
That's poetic. And you know, it's not just the left or the far left. You know, there's right-wing activists too, right? I mean, so that definition could apply to both sides, right?
I suppose so.
You know, that's what they think. I mean, I don't know, but you know, I'm trying because activists can be used for right-wing people as well, right? They're activists for their own causes, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess racism probably.
Yeah.
So okay, great. So thank you for sharing all that, and let's kind of get back to our online and offline lives and privacy and how we protect ourselves, and if we even need to protect ourselves. So, starting with Ms. Blackwood, who's chosen anonymity,
Yeah.
But is that a choice to protect your privacy, obviously, or is there more to it, or
I mean,
for other people?
I've been investigated by the DOJ. I've been illegally arrested. I have to file, lawsuits against the city and the state for violating my privacy and my right to constitutionally be free about addressing my petitioning to the government. So I know how they work, and I'm excited about this trial because we get to actually see how they work, I've been written up in different, like national organizational journalist sightings about courts and privacy and Stingray and different types of software that they use in order to get into your social media or into your phone. I go through phones like water. I went through like maybe 4 phones last year because of the way that they get into your technology. I've worked with the ACLU as far as putting out the mobile justice app so that we could film them. I've cited them for filming us and tried to go to the state capitol to deal with language on that end, help lobby for privacy laws. We've got them passed over the last couple of years. So it's a serious thing. I mean, the point of the matter is that these law enforcement agencies are actually creating profiles. They're actually using those profiles to look at people, to find out what kind of characteristics they have, to find out what kind of groups they engage in, where they hang out at, and that's how they're able to do COINTELPRO. Everybody knows that happens, but they're not realizing that they're giving them the content, they're giving them all of the access that they need in their daily societal norms. And so again, when I answered the question in the beginning and I talked about how I use social media, I'm very deliberate with mine. I don't organize on social media. I don't use Messenger. I don't get into private groups and I won't do any kind of organizing or activating or meetings or any kind of conversations using social media. Everything I put out is just direct information. That's it. And that's because I know how to keep myself safe online. I think that it's when people think that they're building private groups and things of that sort, they got to realize the aggregate is a group of individuals and organizations that are actually tapped into all of that, trying to see what our trends are. What do we like to do? How do we socially, consciously connect with each other? But these same people have stakeholders in all these different industries that would also like to collect that information. And so even being here talking about it, it is to the detriment of our organizing. You don't do those things in everybody's face. You don't let them know what you're doing and how you're organizing. Why would you?
Well, that's a
if you
great
want
question.
To be safe.
Why would you? So we kind of talked about this. As far as organizing and for your causes, is social media a necessity? And I'm not. Maybe I'm guessing here, but I would imagine that you guys are in your early 20s or mid 20s ish area. Am I around approximately?
Joe's like 21 or something like that.
Joe's 21. Okay. But I guess what I'm saying is that
at 19.
Generationally, is social media a necessity for organizing? And real quick, back to you. You say you don't use the social media for organizing, but
I'll put an event page up, but we're not counting on the social media to do the organizing. We know the police are watching that, so it's fine. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They can help us get media. Put up the event page. They're gonna call. We use it for props. It's not the real thing.
So as far as, I want you guys to answer the question, but as far as advice goes to people that are possibly newer to organizing, would that be a suggestion that you would suggest?
Tell them to organize in real life with their friends, get in connected places with people and start building your committees and everything else and start finding out where you want to do your organizing and make it work. You don't need the internet to do that. It's fast-paced for getting effective information, for research, for developing networks. That's what it's for. Specific uses. But if you're trying to promote your agenda, you have to do that out in the real world. You actually have to go out and meet with people and be in places where actual people are. And especially if you're an activist, if you're not advocating, if you're not doing community engaged work, then it's really just propaganda. So get out there and do the work.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm sort of asking it as a tool for organizing.
Yeah,
so
not online events.
What's
So-
your...
I absolutely don't plan to organize anything via Facebook or Instagram or any social media really. We download privacy apps on our phones. You can do so as well with keeping your passwords all secure in one app as well. But just as Tress was saying, most organizers will use social media as props to let people know. But a lot of the work is done by networking, face to face with our community members. Someone I see on the Mac stop that might be interested, I'd be like, hey, just let you know, because that person will go home and tell 2 or 3 other people, hey, so there was this girl on the Max the other day, and she was telling me about this event. You think we should do that? Yeah, networking, how it works.
IRL, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, when you post an event online, you have to operate under the assumption that the police are going to see that, and even other types of adversaries are going to see that. So the real important information that pertains to that event cannot be there.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it takes place is something you might need just to get people to know about it and just show up. But
Okay.
As Miss Black Woman was saying, the Facebook, social media, it's not a tool that you want to exploit. It's a facilitator. It's something you use for people who are not connected, for people who don't have the time or they don't care enough to understand and to get involved in the social justice community. I feel like Facebook and social media, their biggest use is just for facilitation. It's very harmful to you and to anyone you organize with to use social media in a more open and direct action way. You don't plan on social media, because I've personally had fake accounts contact me and ask me questions where you go and you look and the account's only been around for 3 weeks. They have no friends. You see these accounts that are just made to get the information from you, and 9 times out of 10, it's for an adversary. It's for someone who wants to stop the change you're trying to make, someone who wants to ruin your event, or someone who wants to exploit your event for their own cause.
Well, that sounds like great advice for anybody online to protect their privacy, is that if somebody comes on and says, I want to be your friend, and starts asking you questions, and they have no friends and they've only existed for a couple of weeks, then that's pretty obvious that this is some sort of robot or somebody trying to infiltrate you, or some sort of BS that you don't want to mess with.
they call them sock puppet accounts.
Sock puppet accounts.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what was your original question again? I just want to double check on that.
How do we protect our online safety? Kind of that we're since we are online so much, how do we... But I think we kind of covered it a little bit, how we use the tool, what the tool is useful for, some of its.
Another thing that I always do, and it probably drives all my other activist friends crazy, people who I see out there with me during events and such, I see them, they see me, but I may not know their name. We just know that we're here for the same purpose, and that's what's really important. So I definitely will not friend anyone unless I have said, hi, my name is Alia, and we have shaken hands.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do not add anyone until I have shaken their hand and met them personally.
That's good advice.
Yeah, we've had situations where suddenly someone's account has way too many mutual friends.
With really crummy people.
Yeah, and
Crummy.
we... Sorry, forget it.
Tokens.
If you are, especially on Facebook, where so much photo content is shared and stored, you have to be very careful with who you friend, because if you're not taking the necessary security steps of everything you have on Facebook is private, only your friends can see it, then you can have someone who is 1 or 2 steps removed, they're a friend of a friend, and they can get content on your account.
Right, just like how I Googled Alia or whatever.
Yeah.
And so,
He Googled me.
What?
Yeah, I found out where I grew up. That is not good
That is not
okay.
privacy.
Clean that up.
That's not good security.
so we've talked about how to protect ourselves online and our privacy online. How do we do that in real life if we're out there on the street activating people and trying to make a change. Is that important for you? Is that important for individually? How does that work?
Yeah, if you have a car, I'd say if you want to protect your privacy, don't throw all kinds of outrageous bumper stickers that'll get people's attention. Just a little side tip, because if people are creeping through your neighborhood and they see your car, they can tell what kind of person you are, and if they hate that kind of person, they know where you live, and you're right there. All your stuff's right there. So that's one thing that I would like to advise people of.
Okay.
And then, if you are, in action in real life, there is certain security risks that you just have to make peace with. You have to make peace with that there are going to be people who are taking your photo. There are going to be people who are recording you, who are going to repeat what you've said. Those are certain things that you have to acknowledge beforehand and be okay with. And if you're not, as media has pretty thoroughly covered, there's a tactic called black bloc, which is when you dress in one color, you cover your face. I know some people who've gone as far as putting voice modifiers into their masks. Those are really the only in-person, mid-action security protocols that I'm aware of. But there could definitely be more out there.
You guys have anything?
Yeah, so like when I'm networking, because that can be a little bit dangerous too, because you really never know where someone stands. Because a year and a half ago, I stood on the other side, so you really just don't know. So I always kind of make conversation, fill it out a little bit, see what they're bringing up, and then I might invite them to something, or ask them a few questions, and then based on that, then I might tell them the work I do and a little bit more about me. But you really have to gain my trust before I tell you more about me. But does not mean that you can just be nice to me and kiss my ass. That's not how it works.
So you're saying develop personal relationships is the key.
Yeah,
there.
but you also have to remember that there are people on the other side who will work on developing a relationship with you to understand more about you and your movement and what you're working on. Yeah.
Oh.
What?
I'm like, no, he looked at me like, what do you want to shoot? Well, I've been doing this for a while, and the motives behind it and everything that's happened, I haven't been able to travel by myself in the last 2 years because of death threats. And we're in America. We're in Portland, Whitelandia, and I've been talking about Black Lives Matter since Trayvon Martin got murdered. And standing up as a woman without resources like organizations and agencies backing up what I'm saying. So that's a very quiet, lonely place to be in. That's why most of my friends are lawyers and people that can keep me protected legally. But as far as safety, we're beyond that as far as in my consideration. I wasn't able to live with friends, after I got arrested. Because right afterwards, I found out the Department of Justice and other agencies were illegally investigating me, criminally illegally investigating me. And when you don't know who those people are and they're all around you and everybody's a part of that, you really don't have no safe place. I'm hearing people all the time talk about safe places, but being able to just walk to the park by yourself and stuff like that, I used to take those things for granted. I know for sure that it's not okay for me to do that. Especially in my neighborhood, there's a whole bunch of lightning bolts that went up in the last couple of weeks. I have hackers that are on both sides that create profiles that see that they're talking about us and know that we live in certain neighborhoods, know exactly where, people like myself live. So the only thing I can say is that stay lawyered up, make sure that your estate planning is in place, that people that love you know where you are and how to contact you. And that if you do leave, that people that are leaving with you are aware of the risks that they have in being around you. Because if someone wants to hurt you or whatever, they're not going to care that you have a buddy walking with you. You know what I'm saying? They're going to do whatever it is that they feel like they want to do. But just to be mindful of those things and to take whatever precautions, carry your own gun, shoot well, stuff like that.
Yeah, there you go. Arm yourself. I mean, because, I have to, I try to be pragmatic about stuff and try to think about things in a rounded perspective. And it's like, the Nazis guys, they all got fired, right? And because they got their pictures, they're all foaming and all that stuff. It's like, what?
That's because they're doing something wrong.
Right, and I would argue, that's obviously
people are going to pay them for that. People are going to make sure their GoFundMes are patronized. People are going to make sure that they indoctrinate themselves in their community with the justice for those bros. You know what I'm saying? Like, it all works against us because we have the least amount of resources to fight them. But if we're mindful and we build in our communities, then those resources do exist because it's basically the priority of connecting.
Yeah, if I lost my job and experienced unemployment because of my activism, right? Personally, my activism, I wouldn't want to work for those people anyways.
Yeah.
Those aren't the type of people I want to put myself around. They're not, so the people, the white supremacists that were fired over in Charlottesville and stuff. Well, this is like straight up because they probably shouldn't have been doing that. And shouts out to their employers.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
I want to say another thing about tactics of anonymity at direct actions. It's important to be aware that our adversaries will spend hours in their dungeons, in their basements, analyzing footage of things that happen at these events. And so you don't want to wear the same outfit to every event. You don't want to look the same every time because they'll start tracking, you were here, they saw you do this, they saw you do that. And that information is just ready to be exploited at that point. You want to have nothing distinguishable repeated at an event to the greatest extent possible. I know it's not possible for everybody, but.
And I want to say in response to what Joe is saying, as a Black Lives Matter activist, we're going to wear what we wear. I'm going to always be who I am. I don't wear shades and wigs or anything like that. I usually wear a big old shirt that says Black Lives Matter. I'll walk with my shoes untied so people will look down at my feet and then I can look at them like, you worried about me tripping? You ain't worried about me being murdered? That's part of my protest. I come up with ways to identify myself in the movement, but we don't have that opportunity. A cis white male might be able to throw on some stuff that looks different, but the people that want to attack people that are brown, you can't take off the outfit. And I used to think that maybe I didn't look like the woman on Facebook, but everybody's like, nah, you look like yourself, so we really can't change too much. But kudos to you all that can. Cut your hair, put on skinny jeans.
That's kind of the route I've taken. It's just kind of, I go out there and I am myself. And I don't often fully block a mask up. And when I do, it's when it's really, really dangerous. Or because we're in Portland, I'm often the only woman of color around. Quite often, especially in activism. That's really important to acknowledge is that, there's not many people of color in activism. So I often find myself the giant elephant in the room. So in situations like that, I will definitely mask myself up and block up and hide my identity.
Okay. So that's protecting your privacy in real life. And we talked about strategies that you would suggest for other activists to cope with those conflicts. Is there anything in that question that makes anybody?
Yeah. So if you're being targeted and attacked, right, from attending a protest or a rally or a visual or even visiting an exhibit, an art exhibit or anything.
Is it a visual?
Visual.
Oh, visual.
Yeah. So if you're targeted and then you start getting threats, talk to your community. Talk to those people that you stood by on that day, because those people are there for you. That's what activism. Yeah.
And I'd say contact the SPLC and record them. Report every single thing. If people see information or signals or graffiti in their communities, I know a lot of activist groups are talking about going out and painting stuff, and I'm like, no, let's start identifying them and tracking them, because if there's sets of groups that are organizing in those communities, that are leaving information or visual identifiers that they're in your neighborhood or that they're showing up at your protest. Identifying them so that you can do the same thing that they're doing, COINTELPRO, through exploitation or, capturing data on them. We have to dox them so that everybody knows that they're out there. If I'm not aware that they're out there, then I'm not safe. And if my people know that they're out there and they're like deleting them and blocking them and not tracking them, then that's not adding any value to us protecting ourselves. So I think everybody needs to be mindful of that.
And you said SPLC?
The Southern Poverty Law Center. We started sending a lot of the symbols that were being reported to them, and then they gave us information about those different organizations. And I think that after Donald Trump was elected, so many people threw in a lot of money to them. And of course, Oregon, we had reported so many crimes and so many instances that I know that because we have money vested into that organization, that when we file these complaints, they can have investigators come out even when the police don't want to follow up. And so we need that to happen. The same way that they're tracking gang violence for black communities, they need to be tracking the gang violence that's happening from these white supremacists.
Yeah. What about Anti-Defamation League? Is that
any agencies that have the money to do the investigations need to be called on to use their resources to do that.
Since people are obviously interested in helping out your causes, what can you tell them to help them contribute money or be part of what you're doing? What can they do to help?
Lovely black woman.
Oh, shoot. Attend a bystander intervention training. Don't Shoot Portland's been doing that over the last couple of months. It's very necessary because you learn different techniques about what's going on in your community, how people are and how to connect with people, how to build and develop strengthening communities. I think that there's a lot of value in that. I just did a bystander intervention training the other day. And one of the call to actions that I told the people to do was to connect with people right there in their neighborhoods. Go knock on the doors of their neighbors and introduce themselves. And everybody was like, oh, God. And they were so afraid. But I told them, I said, you're the same audience that came here to figure out how to take somebody down on a MAX train. So if you're not interested in meeting the people that live next door to you, but you're willing to put yourself in harm's way to stop somebody from being murdered on a MAX train, then you need to figure out your priorities. So I think that building community is a necessity, and we need to get used to doing that. We need to do more of it.
Probably the only thing that's really going to help, really. If you don't know your neighbors, then what are you going to,
You can't help nobody. You don't feel comfortable in doing that. We have communities right now that people in the same neighborhoods go to the same stores and they never speak to each other. I told people at a group the other day, I said, a neighbor spoke to me the other day, said, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, it tripped me out because I'm like, oh, okay, I've been living here for 2 years and nobody ever spoke to me. That's the problem. People that are emboldened by violence or whatever their activism is leading them to do, they do that because you're weak as a community. Your solidarity is weak. You're not united. And I think that when we talk about 60 million people putting Donald Trump into the White House, that's a very united solidarity movement, right? That's a lot of connected community. Because if we all didn't know that they were organizing that hardcore, then that means that they are doing something that we're not. And so you need to get to your community.
Okay, so you said that was Don't Shoot Portland, and that's .org or
yeah, you can do don'tshootportland.com, or you
.com?
can find them on Facebook, Don't Shoot PDX.
Okay. Any other places you'd like to send people?
To the National Lawyers Guild, I think that we need to start doing social justice fundraising events to go ahead and empower that organization because they support jail support. Most of the lawyers that I know that are out there filing civil rights lawsuits and things of that sort are coming from their organization. And we need to empower them. We need to make sure that they have the money for investigators and researchers and lawyers so that we can continue to fight these causes, because the social justice work is going to play itself out in the courts. And that's where we need it to play itself out so that we can create precedent and change policy. So we're going to continue to be arrested. We're going to continue taking that into the court systems. We're going to continue telling people to speak out and articulate their rights. But I think the biggest value is having legal backup. And so National Lawyers Guild, the ACLU, Agencies of Change, I think they need our support.
Cool, thanks.
Speaking of seeing things play out in court, I want to give a shout out to the Standing Rock water protectors. And I think people should go check out lakotalaw.org and learn about how the mercenary corporation Black Swan lied to police organizations, saying that water protectors were being influenced by jihadists, or that there were jihadists out there. And that was their whole justification for all the nonsense, all the violence, all the arrests. And so they need people to sign a petition, and they need people to donate to their cause, because they have legal fees as well for those people who are arrested. And with the case that they have, the evidence that they have against what was done to them, we're going to see that play out in court as well.
You want to say the name of that one more time?
lakotalaw.org.
Thanks.
But like physically getting involved, not just like donating your money, which is greatly appreciated. It is, but like being physically involved, we do put out posters, like a lot of them. We're just so distracted and moving so fast all the time, like, or on our phones, that like we don't pause and like look at the flyers that are put up. And since I've started to pause and slow down and look at flyers, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool thing happening. Like, I really need to attend that. That's definitely something that should be done. Talk to people on the bus. People on the bus can be crazy, and I know it's scary because of our past incidents, but if you can keep it peaceful, I'm sure they can too. I mean, if they can't, then like get out of there, of course. But we also, I know of an organization, Portland's Resistance, and they do meetings every weekly, and you can just go fill it out, just see how it is, and you can get a hold of them on their Facebook page, and meet up with them once a week, or just see how you like it. And even then, you might meet someone else from another organization, you know, that an organization that you're more interested in, where you fit better. So
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, open your eyes, look around your community, look what's going on. Just like you said, look at, if things are popping up there, you don't know what the symbols are, ask somebody, Google it, because you don't know what's going on until you open your eyes and see what's going on in your neighborhood.
So organizations are amazing, and they're a great way to facilitate change. But if you really want to effectively change, it has to start in your community. Yeah. You have to build the community within the people of a mile from you. The people who you see every day, the people who are going to see it when someone breaks into your home, the people who are going to see it when you are beat in front of your house, when you are beat at the bus stop, when people are putting Nazi flyers up. The people, you need to build the trust in the community, because without that trust, without that connection and that mutual cause, change will never happen. We need, like, this is not a small change. There are big problems that we need fixed, and it's not something we can do with, 100,000 people in the streets. We need millions and millions of people, and you don't get that kind of support without people having small community connection.
Good point.
If you want to help our cause, get to know your community, educate your community, take the time to make sure that your community understands, why do Black lives matter? And
respect your brown and black peers.
Say it loud, what?
And respect your black and brown peers.
Yeah.
Your neighbors.
When people say that they're oppressed, you listen to them. You don't try to convince them that they're wrong.
I know, please. People say, I know you.
I mean, it depends. That depends. But yes.
Well, you know which people I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Who I'm not talking about.
Yeah. But others might not know. So could you elaborate on that, maybe?
I'm not talking about white people.
All right, cool.
Okay, so thank you guys for being here so much. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for being frank. Thank you for being open. Thank you for being real. Thank you for being black. Thank you for being white, whatever the hell you are. Thanks for being a human. It makes me feel very optimistic to know that people on the street are smart, passionate, young, whatever, and doing it. So thank you for watching. If you're interested in community media and you want to learn more, visit opensignalpdx.org and drop by our place and come by, check us out, learn how you can get involved with the media. So thanks for watching. Thanks to the crew. Thanks to Chris Fuzell. Thanks to Teresa. Thanks to...
I'm Miss Black Woman.
Oh, Miss Black Woman. Thanks to Aaliyah. Thanks to Adam, Joe, the crew, Uncle Vince. Good night.
Black Lives Matter.
Oh, yeah,
Black Lives Matter.
All right.
Today we've heard a lot about the tactics and strategies used by local activists to protect themselves online and off. We're very grateful to our guests for their willingness to frankly discuss such a sensitive topic. There are a few things that you can do right now to begin defending your personal privacy, and these are: use a password manager like LastPass or Dashlane. Reusing that already bad password is a terrible idea. Turn on two-factor authentication for your email, Twitter, Facebook, all of your social media accounts. And only use a secure text messaging app like Signal, Wire, or WhatsApp. And finally, always use a virtual private network or a VPN whenever you're using an insecure network like public Wi-Fi. Services like TunnelBear are free and easy to use and keep your internet activity safe from prying eyes. I'd like to again thank our guests and you, the viewer. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a part of community media, please visit opensignalpdx.org. My name is Chris Daley, and stay safe and sane.
Oh yeah.